one of my family members, he has a back problem. So he had fallen on a board, and he was like, yeah, I fell on a board and my back has been hurting. And I was like, oh, is it C1, C2? Is it C8 or what? And he's like, how do you know all about this? I was like, this is my job. Basically, I know where all your cervical issues or lower back issues are. So yeah.
You're like, I'm a doctor on the side.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
This is our Morgan Akins Expert Witness podcast. I'm Barak, Kassutto. I'm an associate at the Philadelphia office. I focus on workers' compensation defense for employers and insurers throughout Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Can I have my other co-hosts introduce themselves?
Sure. My name is Abhi. I am an associate at Morgan Akins as well, and I am in the automobile trucking liability division of Morgan Akins, and I work closely with the two partners in this practice. One is Oliver Brooks, and the other one is Nate.
I'm Caitlyn. I am a summer intern here just for the summer, and I have been working in all of these areas, just pitching in where I can.
So, Caitlin, how have you been liking the practice so far that we have here?
I've really liked it. I feel like I've learned a lot from various different practice areas. And I've gotten a good exposure to how they all work from like a big picture. So it's been really good. I've really enjoyed it.
That's good. Is this your first law firm internship, or you've done with another law firm before this?
I've worked at a personal injury law firm for a couple years before law school. So I did get, some exposure to insurance defense that way. And then last summer I was working with a legal aid organization.
That's cool. And what kind of practice was that with the legal aid organization?
It was just giving like a wide variety of legal services to people in Philadelphia with disabilities. So a lot with Medicare and Medicaid, Social Security, some family law and housing, a lot of housing law.
Gotcha. Great. Barak, you have anything to ask Caitlin, or do we want to jump into the topic of the day?
Caitlin, have you seen any expert depositions at our firm yet so far?
I have. I have seen one.
Okay. And obviously we can't talk about specific clients or cases, but in broad terms, can you tell us what you saw?
Sure. This expert was a human factors expert, and so he kind of testified to the like ways that humans interact with their environment and how they fall particularly. So it was interesting. I didn't know any of the topics that he was speaking about, so I learned a lot.
Is this defense expert, or was this for the other side?
This was a plaintiff's expert.
And what was the matter? Was it a product liability case or just a general negligence case?
It was a extra contractual liability case, and this woman fell in her home.
Oh, okay. So it was more of a slip and fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Got it.
So Caitlin was kind enough to outline some questions for us. So why don't you take the lead, Caitlin, and you can move through those areas, and we'll weigh in.
Yeah, that would be great. So So these questions, both of you can answer. If it's more fitting for just one of you to answer, that's fine too. But I guess to start, if you want to just talk about how you use experts in your area of practice, or how they are used, if it's not by you, by the other party.
I'll go first, Avi, if you don't mind, just because I think
of course.
my answer might be a little shorter. So workers' comp, it's kind of a narrower practice area than some of the general litigation stuff. And so our use of experts is primarily limited to medical experts to establish whether a condition is work-related and whether it's disabling. And additionally, we'll use vocational experts in labor market surveys and earning power assessments. So those are cases where a job with the pre-injury employer is no longer available. And it's a question of, well, this person has a disability from a work-related injury. They have some restrictions upon their ability to return to work. We can't offer them a job with their old employer. We'll use a vocational expert to establish any residual earning power, taking into account these work restrictions. And they do a labor market survey to get those numbers. And then on the medical side, all flavors of medical witnesses, orthopedics, neurologists, psychiatrists, all the flavors of anything that might result from a work injury. Avi, what about you?
Let me be honest now. Before I joined the practice here with Morgan Akins, I was working at another law firm, and there I was doing labor and employment practice, and we generally we never used experts there because the cases mostly ended up settling the way they were, because I think in labor and employment there's more towards settlement because the employers don't want more exposure there, and they don't want to go further into litigation because it's the economics of it. But here we have in the automobile practice that we have, because the injuries are catastrophic at times, so they do require experts to bolster their position. So we end up using a lot of experts like accident reconstruction experts. We use biomechanical experts. We use obviously liability experts, medical experts like doctors, especially, who tell us how the injuries have happened and how they have affected their pre-existing injuries, or the injuries that have happened because of the accident, and what their current state of affairs are and whether they will be improving or not. So we have independent medical examinations done of those very people. So those are the experts. Then I think in this recent case I was doing with Nate, it was hard to get this particular expert. It was a very niche practice. The case was about a stampede, and we needed an expert who could give his opinion about crowd control, and in case a stampede occurs in an establishment, how the protocols have to function, how everyone else who is working on behalf of the organization, the security and etc., how they have to function, and what is the liability pertaining to that. So those are the kind of experts I have come across so far.
Great, thank you both. That's very insightful. So when you use an expert, how do you decide whether you're going to use one? And then also on that, what do you look for in your specific expert when you're choosing the specific expert?
When I decide that I need one is usually when there is a sort of prima facie issue that needs to be addressed, right? That the evidence suggests that someone may have sustained a work injury, and I need an opinion, a medical opinion oftentimes, as to whether that is a work-related condition, if it's significant, if it's disabling. I can certainly take a look at what medical records show. I've reviewed enough medical records in my time to get a pretty good feel for things. But at the end of the day, I'm not a doctor. So we bring in those guys to give us formal opinions on those. On the earning power side, those are pretty clear cut. It's where, we think that there's not a pre-injury job available, and there's an ongoing disability claim and we want to limit that exposure. In those cases, we'll bring in the vocational expert. In terms of what you look for in an expert, I think that for me, at least, that's a much more interesting question. Obviously, you need someone who is an expert, right? You need the baseline qualifications, the CV, and that depends upon the area, the specific qualifications you need. But, what makes a good expert in terms of a testifying expert? I've spent some time thinking about that because I've also had folks come to me sometimes and ask me for advice if they want to get into that line of work, what sort of things they should be considering. One of the things that I like as an attorney is the ability to make skilled concessions. So there are issues that are going to come up in the deposition of an expert witness where to be credible, the expert witness is going to have to make a concession. They're going to have to, when the other party asks them on cross-examination, well, doctor, wouldn't you agree X, Y, and Z? And, if they argue that point, if they become argumentative, even if it would at the surface level seem to help my case, they're not going to be credible with the fact finder. So they have to know on those instances where to make the concession, and they have to do it skillfully so that it's a limited concession, that it's not seen as argumentative, and that they have to have some trust that on redirect or, that I'm going to come around and give them a chance to answer more fully. And that's not something you can tell just by looking at someone's CV. So, we'll often ask other attorneys, if you worked with this person before, what do you think? And yeah, those are my thoughts there.
Yeah, I think somewhat my thoughts are similar to that. So how I narrow down looking at experts is I do look at the resume. I look at how many depositions they have done, plaintiff versus defense. That is an important thing to see whether you want that person on your side. If they have been like 60% of the times they have been deposing for plaintiff and 40% for defense, then you need to wonder whether you want them or not as much. Then you have to see what are their qualifications, whether there's relevant expertise of that particular expert that you need. Then you have to see what hands-on experience they have had. And other than that, after you have sifted those experts through the resume and their qualifications, you need to sit down and chat with them, have a one-on-one conversation, ask them very relevant, specific questions that, okay, if this question comes up, if that question comes up, what would you say? What would be your response? So that you'll see if they are confident enough in bringing a case or giving their opinion in such a way that would be favorable to your side. And then their ability to improvise at that spot. So things like this, that helps you kind of narrow down which expert would be good for you. So those are the things that I would generally see. And last but not the least is the cost benefit, because if the expert is really good but is super expensive, you still have to talk to your client to see if you still want that expert on your behalf, to speak on your behalf or not.
Yeah, that all makes sense. I feel like also the concessions point that you made, Barak, is really important, because I would think of myself like if I was, a jury member, I would be listening to an expert and think about, when they're willing to adjust what they're saying or admit that they don't know something or, make a concession. I feel like that would make them more believable to me as somebody trying to learn more about the issue. So,
yeah. And one of the things that I do when I prepare a non-expert witness is I tell them their attorney as if they're a friend who's a little confused. You be polite to them, but you can hold your ground. I don't usually give that instruction to expert witnesses because they testify regularly. They know they're supposed to be polite. But that's come up in some of my depositions where a doctor who's been my expert has been rude to opposing counsel. And I don't like that. It doesn't play well with the fact finders. And I don't use those experts again.
Yeah, I mean, especially not just on the transcript, but if it's video recorded, I'm sure Barak would know better, since he has done so much, that if it comes in front of the jury and if it's recorded that way, that he's being rude or he has some kind of an attitude, the jury will not like that. And they tend to then obviously be swayed to the other side because they feel something is up.
So I guess that brings up another question that I was thinking of is, do you tend to choose experts who have, been in depositions before and have, testified in court before, or does that not really play into it?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's money on the line in all these cases, right? So our clients on the comp side, and I'm sure it's true for Avi as well, they're looking for a known quantity. They're not looking to roll the dice on someone new. Now, in certain cases, you might need someone who has limited testimonial experience. For instance, sometimes you might want to put on a treating physician, and a treating physician may not have testified all that much. So in those cases, you handle those very differently. But generally, when we're looking for an expert, we're looking for someone who's done it before. That leads you to the fun question. Well, every expert has to get their start somewhere. How do they get into the business? And in some cases, just due to availability or particular expertise being limited or calendar limitations, you'll have to use someone who doesn't have a ton of experience. And in those cases, we'll make sure as the attorneys to prepare with the expert more than we normally would.
Yeah, and like I said earlier, like when I was looking for an expert in a niche area like crowd control or security protocols, you won't have a ton of experts there anyways. So you may at times have to get new people who haven't had that kind of expert opinion experience in the past. So that will be some areas where it's new people you can try. But yeah, generally we try to replicate the people we have used in the past. And just because it's based on safety, and it's also the cost mechanism involved there because they know us, we know them, and they have testified in the past. But the way I try to find experts is there are various listservs of the Bar Association. Also, there are private organizations and entities that provide these experts on various areas of the law. And what I personally do is I also go on Lexis, and there's literally expert opinions, or there are resumes on Lexis, and from there you can narrow down what kind of experts have been there in the past and what areas of law they have provided expertise on.
The trade-off there, the cost benefit, and I think Abhi and I agree, we like the people who have experience. The trade-off to that, though, is that during the voir dire for the expert, opposing counsel is going to ask, how often do you testify? How much are you paid to testify? So that can detract from their credibility somewhat. And if you can find someone in those rare instances who has not testified a lot, but who's just really good, that will add to their credibility, I think.
I mean, have you ever had an expert where that was a major problem, where they had been in court a lot previously and it really damaged their credibility in that way? Or is that just, it might happen sometimes?
Experts I use for my clients' cases are amazing, perfect in every way. But I've heard judges refer to other experts, and in workers' compensation, the judges are the fact finders. So I've heard some judges refer to some experts in not nice terms. If they testify enough and they testify poorly enough, they can gain a reputation. I guess it's somewhat different in the civil litigation area that Abhi's in, because you never have the same jury twice, whereas we'll have the same judges over and over.
Yeah, I haven't had that kind of experience right now, but I hope I don't get that kind of an experience also if that comes to that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then this might differ for each of you, I'm not really sure, but when are you using an expert just in like a consulting area, or when are you using them to testify at trial? Can you get into that a little bit?
We don't use expert consultants as much as they might do in the civil litigation world. Most of our experts we're using, we're going to get them to testify, or even if we're not getting them to testify, we'll rely upon their report as a substantive exhibit if the case is appropriate. So the use of experts as consultants is fairly limited in workers' compensation.
Yeah, I would say the same for all automobile cases as well, because I think whenever we use an expert, we think about it because there's some costs attached to it. We just don't use it for consultation purposes. We are like, if we have to get this plaintiff or person, they have to go to the doctor for a medical examination, then there's some costs involved. So we just don't use it for consultation at that time.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Sort of a tangential or answer to your question, and I certainly don't use them in comp, but a consulting expert, not in the traditional sense, but jury consultants. So I know they use those. I don't know if they still use them at our firm. I think we used to have a relationship with a jury consultant, but on the civil litigation side, that is something where you would see a consulting witness as opposed to a substantive witness.
I would generally understand consulting experts would help in building of the case and defense strategy versus actually testifying in the court.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know personally, but Barak has been there longer than me here. So whether that has ever been done in the past to how to build a case, and if there's so much medical documents involved that we need just an expert to be consulted just to build a defense versus needing an expert to actually testify in the court. I'm not sure if that has been done in the past, but till the time I've been here and based on my experience, I don't know. I don't think that has happened.
Are there particular kinds of cases where an expert is like more useful than in other kinds of cases, or how do you determine how helpful an expert is going to be in your specific case? But I guess if you're using them in basically all of your cases, then maybe that's not a good question.
Well, I mean, if I'm using them, and I am using them in nearly all my cases, I think there are cases where it's more of a value add than others, right? So one of the areas where I see a lot of value add is where the experts add, and I'm talking now about medical experts, is where their interpretation and explanation of the medical records and the medical data adds something to the case that can't just be gleaned from looking at the facts as a layperson, right? All of us on this call are capable of reviewing medical records, history, present illness, physical examination findings, even the impression section from diagnostic imaging studies, all that fun stuff. And if an expert tells you that they reviewed those same things and based upon their expertise, it just doesn't make sense that this person sustained a work-related injury based upon their 40 years of experience and training, like that'll get you across the goal line, certainly. But it's not as helpful as if they're adding something unique, as if they not just reviewed the impression section of the MRI of the report, but if they reviewed the actual films. And in reviewing the films, they found something that perhaps the interpreting radiologist missed. Or if they noticed something in terms of inconsistencies in the physical therapy records, or, there's a lot of ways that they can add value to a claim and see things that we as attorneys will miss because we're not experts. And in those cases, they are more useful other than just, getting you across the goal line. They'll justify their costs much more in those cases.
Yeah, I mean, I would also say something similar that when you have, say, a very simple case, simple meaning that there's a simple injury, there are eyewitnesses, there is, it's evident that the injury that has happened and versus what they're actually claiming is totally different. Then sometimes don't need an expert there because you have enough evidence to nullify what the plaintiff is saying. But then there are cases where there's no eyewitness account, and then the accident, if it's a simple uh, rear end collision and there is not much damage to the vehicle, but there's significant amount of medical documents that have been produced by the plaintiff saying that there has been a fusion surgery, there has been this problem, that problem. So then you're like, okay, why are the injuries not correlating with the actual incident? In that case, you have to wonder if there were pre-existing injuries. If there were pre-existing injuries, whether those injuries were exacerbated because of the incident. Then you need experts. Because as a lawyer, you can't really determine that. You need an expert to say that, yes, the pre-existing injuries, yes, they were exacerbated, or no, they weren't. So that's, I think, when the experts are more useful, when there is less other evidence to justify what they are saying versus the other way around.
How do you kind of prepare these experts, especially maybe the ones that don't have as much experience, being an expert in this kind of litigation? So how do you prepare them for being in court or being deposed?
On the comp side, we do almost all of our medical experts by deposition, and I used to do some civil litigation, and I know that a lot of those experts testify by deposition as well, although that's not universally true. Sometimes they'll testify live at a trial. In terms of how to prepare them, part of it is you tell them ahead of time that they need to not just kind of jump to the conclusion, that they need to work their way through. And if it's someone who is a seasoned expert who's done this 1,000 times, they'll do that already. If it's someone who does not have a ton of experience testifying, even if you give them that instruction ahead of time, they may not remember to do that. But that is part of our jobs as the attorney, is that we're asking the questions. So if they jump to the conclusion without offering the supporting reasoning, you can back up and ask the question again more clearly and say, hold on, doctor, I understand that you say there's no radiculopathy based on the physical examination findings. Can you tell me what physical examination finding you're relying upon? All right. And can you tell me what the relevance of that finding is? How do you perform it? So we control that. And so, even if our instructions don't take, we can still, pay attention and correct it on the spot while we're doing the testimony.
Yeah, I've also seen when I was interning with the city of Philadelphia in my first year of law school, and I've seen expert testimony being given in the court in a trial that I attended. Jury members do get bored pretty quickly, and then their attention span becomes very minimal. And sometimes your entire case hinges on what the expert is going to say. So you need the jury to keep listening to the expert. So there has to be some kind of a storytelling there involved, some kind of visual aids being used so that their attention is still there. And they can use examples also, that how what they're trying to explain is not super technical, that how in layman terms it applies to the general scenario. And for all of that, probably you need to practice a lot with the expert. You have to bring them around to saying that, okay, just don't be super technical about it. Like a doctor cannot just keep using the technical terms, because all the jury members won't really understand that. So it's about storytelling, focusing on the points and using examples so that the jury stays involved with the case and what he or she is trying to say as an expert opinion.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can imagine it is probably hard for an expert to speak about something that they're so familiar with in their work that just feels so natural for them to speak about, but to have to explain that to other people who are not as familiar, I'm sure that could be challenging, but they get through it. I guess just unless you guys have anything else that you want to speak about, my last kind of formal question here was if you guys had any interesting stories. That's a very like open-ended kind of question, but if there was any interesting experiences you had with experts, or just anything else you guys want to speak about on this topic as a whole.
So interesting expert war stories. I have a few of those. A lot of our experts, we do medical stuff and we do the vocational guys. And I was involved in a line of cases involving pharmacy pricing in workers' compensation. And at the risk of putting anyone who may be listening to sleep, it involved average wholesale price for pharmaceuticals and what that means and whether it's a term of expert to testify to that. And most folks that I spoke to seemed to think that the best expert would be a pharmacist. And I strongly disagreed with that because pharmacists are experts in pharmacy. They may not necessarily be experts in pharmacy billing and medical billing as a whole, which is an entire subfield of expertise. So I went out and I found a healthcare economist and got him as an expert. He was very well qualified, very smart guy. And his testimony subsequently led to a line of cases that's caused in the small world of Pennsylvania workers' compensation, pharmacy billing caused some waves. So that was pretty exciting for me. I have some more stories, but I'll let Avi take a turn.
I don't have stories yet in that area, but I was reading. I just came across on LinkedIn this one ad about use of experts, and that was accident reconstruction and what they did and how accident reconstruction, the way their services were, how their video making and how the technology that they were using helped the plaintiff get enhance or balloon the compensation that they were aiming for to what it actually became. So the jury was really affected by, oh, this is how actually the accident happened. This is how the plaintiff actually felt when the accident happened. So these things, when accident reconstruction experts, they make a video and they show that this is how actually the accident happened, that really helps the case a lot. So that was something interesting that I saw, that, okay, visually how things are affected in a trial. And now AI is being used in that area also. So AI is changing the landscape completely. Like now AI is being used to assess vehicle damage. And when there is a processing of claims, they just reduce the use of humans in that area because they can assess the photographs, they can estimate repair costs because they have a vast database to take from and then apply it to that particular situation. So AI is kind of taking over, which I want to see. It's not going to completely take over because we do need that human interaction. And then there are questions to be asked to an expert, but somewhere AI is taking over, which is an interesting concept. And we can talk about that because AI itself is a separate podcast, I feel. So yeah, but those are the two interesting things that I came across.
I heard just in my classes, from a lot of my classes this year were in healthcare and healthcare law, and there has been, I guess, chatter about AI and like ChatGPT being able to diagnose patients and like prescribe medicine based on, medical records and a diagnosis. And it just, like, to me, it makes me wonder, like, if AI going forward could be used as a medical expert. The whole thing is very scary, but it's kind of just like, it's out there,
Yeah, my only thing to that would be that yes and no. Yes, a person AI could be used as an expert because they would have vast knowledge, but then would a juror be able to connect with that person? That's the only thing.
yeah, I mean, I feel like at this point, I don't think people have this like overwhelming trust of AI. At least I don't. So I can't imagine people buying that, at least right now. And also AI is only as good as, the data that it has. So I feel like in the medical field in particular, where things are always changing, that could be a challenge for sure. But we could talk about the horrors of AI all day.
I don't have any AI stories, fortunately. I will tell one more story, not about an outside expert, but maybe I'll just say about attorneys as experts, and not in the classical sense of like, a med or a legal malpractice case or something like that, but just something that stuck with me from my former employer, a guy named Jerry Pomerantz. I worked for him when I came out of law school as a small plaintiff shop. And we were doing an employment discrimination case. And the theory was this client of ours was discriminated against. He was working at a job that did a very heavily regulated manufacturing site. And this plaintiff was subsequently fired and believed he was fired due to discrimination. And they alleged that he was actually fired due to screwing up on the job. And what my boss did was he went out and he became himself an expert in all of the regulations pertaining to this product that was being manufactured at this site. And it was a federally regulated product. And he read the books on the regulations and from front to back. And he discovered that if the plaintiff had screwed up as they alleged, they would have had to report it. And they didn't. So, obviously he cannot testify to that as an expert. But just on the general theme of expertise, it's an important thing to remember that although we are not going to go ourselves and testify, that as attorneys, we can become experts to the extent that it's useful for our clients in these areas. We can read the regulations, we can read the, handbooks, and it can help our clients, it can help our cases.
Yeah, that was one thing I also liked about being a lawyer is that you get to dip into so many aspects of occupation and life and various areas because law is connected with almost everything in the society that you tend to become a kind of an expert in that area for that small amount of time because you need to read every single thing about that. So I quite like that part. And again, speaking to the broad theme of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I feel like we always, as lawyers and people working in this area, we always forget how much we're learning on a daily basis, even if it's not, to become necessarily an expert in something. You still learn so much just by doing this kind of work.
It's funny. It's the funny thing because I went for a social gathering event with my family and relatives, and one of my family members, he has a back problem. So he had fallen on a boat and he was like, yeah, I fell on a boat and my back has been hurting. And I was like, oh, is it C1, C2? Is it C8 or what? And he's like, how do you know all about this? I was like, this is my job. Basically, I know where all your cervical issues or lower back issues are. So yeah.
You're like, I'm a doctor on the side. But not really.
But not really.
I know enough to be dangerous, but not enough to fix it. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that about covers it, right, guys? So,
yeah, unless you guys have anything to add.
No, thank you, Caitlyn, for outlining those issues for us and leading the discussion. And thank you to Abi for giving us your expertise as well. And
Dr. Abi.
Thanks, bro. No, thank you, both of you. It was great talking to you both.
All right.
This was so cool.
fun.
Thank you.
All right.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.